I do want to say that, of course, over the past months, it has become very clear to me, and in my own personal career, it was very clear to me that torture is hardly a new phenomenon. Historically, I realize now, and I guess I realized it then, but we didn't put the T word, the torture word, to it, that many of my political clients, particularly the Black Panthers and the Black Liberation Army people, were, of course, tortured when they were captured. They were subjected to what would be waterboarding today. I had a client who was captured after the notorious Brinks, the murder of the 2 cops up in Nyack, New York, an ugly case. He was taken to a precinct in Queens. His head was held in the toilet, and the toilet was repeatedly flushed over and over and over again so that he could not breathe. This is the water treatment. That happened in 1981. And he got in front of a jury in the Southern District and asked the question, if I am just a criminal, as the government would have you believe, why don't they treat me like a criminal? Why do they treat me like a political person? And of course, if you go back in time, in the recent New Yorker article that talked about the Philippines and how they, the partisans who opposed them in the War of 1898 were given the water cure, which is in effect the water torture, which is in effect waterboarding, and in Algeria, the very moving, which we've heard on WBAI repeatedly, the French, whose name is escaping me, who was waterboarded in Algeria. And that also is part of our collective remembering. And of course, I have to say, and this is where the San Francisco 8 comes in, I think one of the most pernicious clouds on our horizon right now is the notion that torture, what has been extracted under torture, may be introduced into a court of law. We had come a very, very long way from that. You realize those cases, those wonderful cases that all lawyers love from the 70s, the ones that said, you know, the most famous case, the Miranda case. You have to give a fellow warnings. You have to tell him he doesn't have to talk. If he talks, he can be. This is so far from where we are today. We're talking about, in the San Francisco 8 case, men who were seized in New Orleans in the 70s under a ruse that they were somehow or other involved with cop killings. They were Panthers, they were Black Liberation Army people, and they were tortured. And if you ever get an opportunity to listen to them personally or see the film that was made about this, the face of torture is so real in this. And it's got to be the ugliest face. It is the most dehumanizing thing that one person can do to another person, to inflict pain, to turn that person into an animal, to turn that person into someone who has no thought but to speak to save his own life. At any rate, they were captured in New Orleans and tortured and made statements. Those statements were introduced against them in a case in Los Angeles, in federal court. The whole case was thrown out because statements under duress are no good. They're no good because they're not reliable. They're no good. People say what you want them to say when you're under torture. I don't know if you remember, but sometimes in the 50s we used to play things like, if you were captured by the enemy, how long would it take you before you talk? Well, these were hypothetical questions in those days. Today it's not so hypothetical. And if you listen to the Winter Soldier testimony as it's being broadcast on WBAI, I tell you, I had to turn it off the radio yesterday. I couldn't bear it. What has been done to these youngsters of our own country, what we have done to them in the name of this war. But at any rate, right now, they are now taking, out in San Francisco, in the trial of the San Francisco 8, once again, and of course this is a wonderful irony of the left as ever, Jerry Brown, no less, yes, the same Jerry Brown of Oakland, California, is now the Attorney General of California. And he has brought this case against the San Francisco 8, all ex-Panthers. One of them was speaking here this morning, actually, Francisco Torres, and using that reworked torture testimony to make this case work. And it is so important because this is a real, got to stop it here, or else the whole framework of coerced confessions, if that's a nice word to put on it, tortured confessions that people are tricked into making, name it what you will become the rule in the courts, and they will just bring people in and say, this is what he told us, okay, guilty, goodbye. So that is why that case, which is still out there, still being supported very strongly by many, many people. They had full courtrooms when I was out there recently. But I want to return just another moment to torture as denigration, as what it means. And you know, I was struck the other day, and I don't know whether this is a completely accurate description, but the fact that it seems always to be used on non-white people. We're very happy torturing the Iraqis. We're very happy torturing those little brown people, as they called them, in the Philippines. We don't hear about them torturing Teutonics. We don't hear about that happening. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It does, of course, happen. I'm sure in what was once Yugoslavia, when that fell apart, there probably was torture. There always is. It's part of a war, I think. But I am just struck by the fact that now when we hear it, it's always easier to use it on persons of color, which I know is not a correct term anymore. We shouldn't be using it. But at any rate, it's the easiest overall descriptive term. I remember that, black people always knew in this city that if they got arrested, they got a beating. It went with it. It was an automatic. And my husband Ralph was arrested in 1965-6 with James Meredith, who was the person who integrated the University of Mississippi. Ralph was leading a struggle for a freedom school in Harlem and community control. And as they were about to go do the thing, James Meredith showed up on the picket line. And so they went and they breached the police line and got to the school, but they got arrested. And they were taken to the precinct, and the mandatory beating was administered to both of them. And Meredith said, I am never coming back to New York. This is worse than Mississippi. This is worse than anything I ever encountered there. So it's not delimited by place, it's not delimited, but I do think it is similar to Hiroshima in some ways. It has never been lost, I think, on the people of the world that the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. It was not dropped on Berlin. And I think to the degree that still resonates, and now the torture thing, it is brown people, it is Arabs. These are the people who are subjects for torture.